Thank you so much, Yelda. I'm so excited to be here. Welcome, everybody. Been talking about doing an event for a while, so I'm super excited to be part of the Safety Summit. So I'm just going to share my screen, this guy, and then I will, and then I just gotta go to present. All right, can everybody see my screen? All right, great. So I'm super excited to be here at the Safety Summit focused on women feeling safer in their bodies, environment, and their lives. And today I'll be giving a quick AI primer and touching on the topics of data ethics and how we can all create a more equitable future by having these conversations together. All right, so Yeldo gave a great intro of NYAI. We're a global AI community focused in New York and beyond. A portion of proceeds goes to fund that free intro to AI workshop, which she mentioned. So if you're interested in learning more or joining the community, feel free to sign up at nyai.co. And if you're interested in partnering with us at NYAI, you can email us at hello@nyai.co. All right, that's out of the way. So before we jump into AI, we first need to understand the importance of data. Data is the new oil. Clive Humby said this in 2006, and what he meant was that data had become the most valuable commodity in the modern economy. And if you don't believe me, here is how much data is generated for every minute of every day. This is from the Domo Data Never Sleeps graphic that they put out every year. And for context, the internet reaches 56.1% of the world's population, which represents about 4.39 billion people. So let's just take a minute to let these figures sink in. Google conducts nearly 4.5 million searches every minute. Tinder users are swiping, hopefully right, 1.4 million times. YouTubers are watching 4.5 million videos a minute, and over 18 million texts are sent. So Americans alone are using 4.4 million gigs of internet data every single minute. So those numbers are staggering and show no signs of slowing down. And in July 2019, they estimated that by 2020, for every person, megabytes of data will be created every second. And for anyone who just joined, awesome that you're here. Please mute yourself just so I can get through. I have a lot of slides to get through, so trying to get through this. Sorry. Okay, so as of July 2020, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created per person every day. So we have already exceeded the past projections. So what does this have to do with AI? AI requires data. In order to get smarter, AI requires a lot of data to be fed into an algorithm to train and retrain the model. And our consumption patterns are already being shaped by machine learning algorithms behind Spotify's Discover Weekly or Netflix recommended for you products. And more importantly, data reflects the social, historical, and political conditions it was created, which an AI system will then learn from. So getting into AI. What is AI? First of all, we'll talk about what it's not. It is not Terminator, Skynet, and AI is not magic. They do say that AI is a new electricity. Andrew Ng, former chief scientist at Baidu, which is the Chinese equivalent of Google, says that just as electricity has transformed almost everything 100 years ago, today, I actually have a hard time thinking of an industry that I think AI will transform in the next several years. So artificial intelligence is an intelligent behavior in an autonomous agent. It's describing the brain, not the body of an intelligent machine. So AI does not equal robots, but the fields of robotics can definitely overlap with AI, like seen in the products of Boston Dynamics. And the AI of today can do very specific tasks like book meetings or diagnose cancers or pick your next Netflix binge. And AI research is leading towards something called, a little bit more advanced, called AGI, or artificial general intelligence. This is when a machine can do things in a way that is indistinguishable from human behavior. And that would lead to what is called the technical singularity. That's not what we're going to go into today. It's a little bit more kind of sci-fi, even though people are definitely working on the beginnings of what this could be. For now, I'm more interested in the practical applications of narrow AI and what's happening today. So a few applications today, there's a lot of number crunching, business intelligence, predictive maintenance in IoT, search recommendations, forecasting models, a lot of things going on in vision, computer vision, so e-commerce, pick and place robots seen in the warehousings of Amazons and the likes, healthcare diagnostics, and language processing. So you may have seen a lot of chatbots, news and media content creation, which is really interesting, smart home interfaces, and text analytics. So steam was invented in 1698. The electric motor, which they know as Industry 2.0, is 1821. And then the information age, or the digital age, came around in the 1970s. They say AI kicks off what is going to be known as Industry 4.0 of connected intelligence. This is a little bit more of a detailed graphic from CB Insights, but my favorite thing to note here is that a lot of people attribute the rapid rise of AI to access to big data and better processing capabilities. So instead of CPUs, central processing units, we're now using GPUs, graphics processing units. And we know AI is shaping our future and well on its way to becoming ubiquitous in our everyday lives. The global AI market is expected to grow massively to almost 90 billion by 2025. So cool, AI is taking over. Why do we care about the ethics of it? And then another thing to note is AI is definitely taking over, but there are definite bottlenecks in terms of adopting AI. Here are some of the most popular reasons. Mostly the difficulties in identifying an appropriate business case, or the company culture doesn't recognize its needs for it yet. All right, so we've established AI. Let's jump into the trust and ethics. In March 2016, Microsoft Research released a bot named Tay. The first sentence of the Verge article that broke the story said, "It took less than 24 hours for Twitter to corrupt an innocent AI chatbot." So essentially, Tay could interact and learn from real users on this social platform. And soon, Tay was exposed to nasty tweets that ended up becoming mean and racist on her own. So we're not at a point where you can simply download a tool to do a job. Data ethics is still new and requires very critical thinking. Another interesting story is ProPublica in 2016 had a landmark news report. They found that software used to predict future criminals is based against Black people. The risk scoring done by the software is seen by judges and directly influences someone's sentences. And white defendants were often mislabeled as low risk compared to Black defendants. Only 20% of those predicted to commit violent crimes went on to do so, which is not a great accuracy. And it goes into the story of Vernon Prater and Brisha Borden. So on a spring afternoon in 2014, Brisha Borden was running late to pick up her god sister from school. Low-income neighborhood. She was very worried that her god sister would be exposed to potential gang recruiting or violence if she didn't pick her up. So she and her friend saw an unlocked bicycle and a scooter on the street and decided to grab the bike and scooter to go pick up her god sister. A neighbor witnessed this and called the police, and Borden and her friends were arrested with burglary and petty theft for the items which were valued at $80. Vernon Prater was picked up shoplifting for about $86 at a Home Depot from at a nearby store there. And you'll see that Vernon Prater had prior offenses with 2 armed robberies, and he had a low risk score of 3, while Brisha Borden with 4 juvenile misdemeanors was shown to have a high risk of AIDS. It's also important to note that Vernon Prater did have a subsequent offense, and Brisha Borden had 0. And in July 2017, the ACLU showed how Amazon's new facial recognition software was incorrectly identifying 28 members of Congress as criminals. A significant paper follow-up showed that facial recognition software performs less well on darker skinned women. So we're living in a world where machines and algorithms are increasingly giving recommendations, tagging content, generating reviews, and even taking decisions. And a number of ethical questions arise. Can we trust machines to do the right thing? Was my loan application processed in a fair manner? Why was my application rejected? So what can we do? First of all, don't panic. Learn more about AI and what's coming. Figure out where we can add value and what's important to us, because we need everyone involved with AI. Past speaker Stuart Culpepper says that the field is so new, there are no real policy experts, so be one. And in time, AI will be written by AI. So it's important to have these open and inclusive conversations so everybody knows that ethics can essentially be encoded in one day. And this shows a common ethical framework considering technology, what can be done with ethics, what should be done, versus the law, what is forbidden to do. And this is just a little bit more about kind of the fields of AI and data science. Here are a couple helpful infographics I show to help people get a better understanding of the fields. So if you think of AI as an all-encompassing field, within those fields, there's going to be machine learning, and then deep learning is even a subset of that. Data science kind of overlaps with all of it. Artificial intelligence also overlaps with data engineering and data science, of course, with data being that center crux. And the Venn diagram of the data scientist really brings in business, programming, statistics, and communication. So if you're interested in learning more, I recommend attend events and meetups. A lot of them are virtual nowadays. Start reading articles and newsletters. You can even do workshops or hackathons. And if you're really interested, you could do a full-on MOOC, a massive open online course. There are a lot of school programs, virtual classes, and YouTube has a ton of great resources as well. Here are some virtual events as well as ours. We recommend data-driven, bots, and AI. You can always find a lot of tech events on Gary's Guide and Eventbrite as well. Here are some newsletters. Katie Nuggets is a huge one, TopBots, AI Weekly. And here are some courses as well. And we can send this as a follow-up if anyone's interested. A lot of these are free, especially the Google AI courses. And that's about it for me. If you have any questions, I think we're going to go through a few now, but you can also feel free to email me at hello@nyai.co and search for us on social at NYAI community. So that's about it. I think at this point, we are just going to go back to questions. So Steffi posted in the chat, if you have a question, you can chat your question right in the chat. You could raise your hand using the hand raising feature, and she will unmute you there.
I do have a question. I saw this thing on Twitter a few weeks ago, and it was like, I guess there's these Twitter lists. There's these lists on Twitter, this function. People can add you to this list. And I heard a lot of women are dealing with harassment through getting added to these lists that they don't even know they're being added on. Are there things like that that we should be conscious of? Are there like, here are the top 5 things you should know when it comes to your data for every woman online?
Definitely. And you were the one that brought up that article to me, and it was really interesting to read through. I'm not really active on Twitter, so it was kind of outside my realm of expertise. But if I had to narrow it down to a couple of points people should be aware of, you know, understand that everything you're posting is saved in some capacity. You know, deleting something from the internet doesn't really exist. There are a couple of organizations that come to mind. There's the Own Your Data campaign. The former business development director of Cambridge Analytica is a woman called Brittany Kaiser. And she was in a Netflix documentary called, is it The Great Hack, I believe? She was a past speaker for one of our events. She's since become a whistleblower on Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and all parties involved. And she runs this Know Your Data campaign. And it activates for people to know where their data is stored and where it's shared. So if you go to the Know Your Data campaign and look up Brittany Kaiser, she has a lot of great resources she's putting out now that would help in that vein. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm definitely, I'm taking notes over here.
Awesome. And I can send some stuff to you for a follow-up email to send out if that's helpful also.
Great. Does anyone want to jump in with some questions?
I know I covered a lot really quickly, so. Oh, here's one. Is there a way to limit AI machine bias in content moderation? Great question. So the short answer is yes, there is a way to limit machine bias in any algorithm that's created. It will have to take into account a lot of the data sources that you're feeding into it. Make sure it is diverse, make sure it's representative, make sure you're not just have a small sample size of people. In terms of more kind of specific applications, and you know, I'd have to see exactly what content you're moderating and what platform it's on and what data sources are feeding into that. So I would say, just from a general sense, the way to limit machine bias is to make sure that you have great data and continuously have a way to programmatically update that data so it continues to showcase a diverse representation of what's out there. Great, here's some other question. How are AI and Bitcoin related? Okay, and what are the best resources you'd suggest for learning more about AI and Bitcoin? Okay, great question. I am not an expert on blockchain technologies. I have partnered with organizers that are and kind of focus on that in their day-to-day lives. So I can definitely follow up with you and point you in direction for learning specific resources, but I don't have great ones off the top of my head. I would suggest learning more about cryptocurrency and blockchain overall before honing on specific currencies like Bitcoin or Ethereum or something like that. Okay, the next question is, how is AI used to create online content? Great question. So the topics, if you wanted to learn more about it, would probably be general adversarial networks. It's something called GANs, is technology within AI that generates more content based on the content that's put in. So have you ever seen, what's an example? Like Barack Obama giving a speech that he would never he would never say. That was made by them feeding in data samples of Barack Obama speaking, and then training a model to be able to speak like Obama, and then giving them a script to just say, in a way that hoping the nuances of how it's spoken is also programmatically affected of putting it all together. So to find out more about that, look up natural language generation or GANs, general adversarial networks. The next one is, are there any consequence for misidentifying criminals? Also, it is still used. Great question. Yeah, I mean, the consequence for misidentifying criminals is that someone who's innocent is going to be looked at as a criminal by the judge and the people who are making decisions about their future. So I think that's a huge consequence of just not having the right accuracy of how this works. And yes, it is used. I don't know how used, but the criminal The criminal facial recognition one that was used by a lot of police officers is called the Compass system. So if you want to look into it, you can research the Compass system and see where it's used. The last time I looked, it was used in, I think, like 40% or something of police departments, but I'm not sure on that stat. All right, sorry, I'm just trying to get through all the questions here. What are some ways people can navigate stigma around AI in the workplace? Great question. So I would say it's very important to make sure you have executive buy-in before you ever implement a new big change in your organization. Make sure you have an executive sponsor that is willing to talk with you and have these conversations and really get an understanding of why you're using an AI and what you're trying to accomplish versus just trying to drop the newest technology on top of everything and saying, we're an AI first organization. Okay, and then how will we distinguish machine written articles from articles, videos, content made by real people? Great question. This is a big ethical question that comes in meetings and events that I do. Right at this point, for most algorithms, people can kind of just tell, but as we get more and more into it becoming indistinguishable, the short answer is you might not be able to tell. So an ethical question is, should we label all the machine generated content and make sure it's very clear to people that this was created by an AI algorithm? I think it's yes, but it's an active debate within the field. Okay, I think we have about 5 more minutes or so for questions. I don't think I missed anything, but if I did, just feel free to chat it again. Okay, one more. Do you know of sources that discuss how AI works globally? And if the data is biased to data collected in North America, what about data from marginalized populations? Let me see if I understand this fully. Sources that discuss how data works globally. So what I think this is asking is, so if data that is collected in the US, is that biased than more other data that's collected in outside countries? I don't know, it's hard to say. I do know that they have similar issues in places like Canada and other places that have kind of a diverse population. So I'm not sure how to answer the question. There are definitely sources that discuss how AI works, but in terms of like globally versus North America, like the AI community is so global. There's so many people from different countries working on the same projects on a lot of different platforms like GitHub and just have open source projects. So it's kind of hard to say. I would assume that any data collection in any country is going to be subject to some biases. So it's important to recognize what those might be in the context of that country. I hope that answers that question. And then, is there current legislation that will control the amount of misinformation that can be posted by machines in very large numbers in regards to labeling? Great question. I'm not positive if there is current legislation, and I know there have been things proposed in the past. I'm not sure about the status of where those exist. But this kind of goes into Facebook and Twitter, deciding what to label and what to hide and show that this might be misinformation. So this kind of goes into the big hearing today with the big 4 tech leaders of, what is their responsibility to moderate content and what should be left to the public. Next question is, how did you get involved with AI? Randomly, very randomly. I'd worked for tech startups. I was at ZocDoc, and a manager there introduced me to these 2 guys who were starting an AI startup. After a couple of months of conversations where I just grilled them, I asked every single question that came to mind. They asked me to come on as a director of product. So I started NYAI as a meetup group to meet more people in the space and to learn what the landscape was and to learn more about AI. And since it's evolved into an organization in and of itself, I did work for that startup for a couple years as I don't even know what the titles were, global head of client development director, who knows, startup life, you know? But that's basically how I got into it. And then can you speak out AI is helping healthcare? This is a whole other talk. I would love to do this talk at one point. AI is helping healthcare in so many interesting things, cancer diagnostics. Let's just talk about COVID. How about that? So COVID and health and AI, drug discovery, they're disinfecting robots in hospitals now. There's identifying which vaccines might be most feasible. There's all sorts of cool stuff going on. I think I probably have time for maybe one more question. How are international governments collaborating to control AI? Is there any collaboration or organization on this front? Yes and no. So governments are, if you have to think of AI as a, oh, hello, can you guys still hear me? All right, so you have to think of AI as a new technology that could potentially be weaponized if you're thinking of it from a governmental perspective. So a lot of these governments are very scared to share different IP and algorithms and all that stuff if it's being developed for specific defense contracts or whatever it may be. But the AI community itself is very open, very, you know, the whole engineer developer community is all about open source and different threads of how I can code this one thing and this thing is breaking in my code, what am I doing wrong? And all about really helping each other and getting more people involved, and is very open and inclusive. There are a lot of third-party organizations who are trying to coordinate the international efforts more from an academic front, because that's going to be a little bit easier to share technology and information. Okay, and then
I think we're going to stop you there, and we're going to push everyone who has more questions to your Instagram. You can find all the speakers that we've brought on today. Yeah, there we go. That's perfect. Thanks, Steffi. And also you could go to Camel Assembly. We've tagged them all, so you could find all of these women, and they're all very approachable. Maryam, thank you so much.